All right, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at a homily, and the topic is one of those things that sounds really simple at first. It's Christ's command to love one another as I have loved you. But the more you kind of dig into it, the more complex it gets. We've got the homily itself, of course, and we're also going to be looking at some related Bible passages. Oh, and we've even got some thoughts from Pope John Paul II to bring into the mix. Are you ready to unpack all this?
Absolutely. It's so interesting how this homily presents Christ's words not just as like a suggestion, but like as this radical call to action, something that can totally transform our lives?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it specifically references John 13.34, right?
Mm.
Where this new commandment is given. That word new always gets me thinking, what makes this commandment different from like the Old Testament commandments, the ones about loving God and your neighbor?
That is such a good question. And the homily seems to suggest that this new commandment is pointing to a different kind of love, like a much deeper, more transformative love. It's not just about like following the rules. It's about tapping into the very nature of God's love for us.
So we're talking about a love that goes beyond just human love, like it's divine.
Exactly,
Right?
divine love. And the homily actually highlights how Pope John Paul II was really big on this idea. He described this love as a divine gift. It's the kind of love that helps us look beyond ourselves, to connect with other people on this deeper level and recognize their inherent dignity, as children of God.
That's powerful. So, how does this divine love actually work in our daily lives? I mean, is it just about being super nice to everyone all the time?
It's more than just, being nice on the surface. The homily uses a story, and it's really compelling. And it shows just how powerful and transformative this kind of love can be. It's a story about a businessman who was kidnapped while traveling abroad.
Okay, before you go on, can I ask? I'm just curious about this businessman. Like, what was he like before this all happened? Before the kidnapping, I mean. Was he already like a very devout person, or did this whole experience kind of lead him to that?
That's a good question. The homily doesn't really get into too much detail about his background, but it does seem like he was very, very focused on his work and achieving success in business. It's not like he was a bad person, but his priorities were definitely more centered on like material wealth and all those professional accomplishments.
So he was living a comfortable life, like in that comfort zone we talk about sometimes.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. Yeah, and then suddenly this kidnapping happens, and it just changes everything for him. He's facing death. He feels totally helpless, totally alone. And in that moment of crisis, that's when he turns to God.
It's interesting how often it takes like a a big life event to shake us out of our comfort zones.
hmm
It makes you stop and think about what really matters, reevaluate your priorities.
It's definitely a theme you see a lot, not just in spiritual writing and stuff, but in our own lives too. And for this businessman, that's exactly what it was. It was a turning point. He realized that all the material success, all the things he'd achieved, it didn't mean anything when he was facing death. What really mattered were his relationships and his connection with something bigger than himself.
Wow. So he has this like huge realization while he's still captive. What happened after he was released? Did he just go back to his old life or was he like fundamentally changed by this?
That's where it gets really interesting. He couldn't just go back to business as usual. This whole experience totally reshaped how he thought about success and what it meant to be happy.
So instead of chasing after bigger deals and more profits, what did he focus on?
The homily talks about this radical shift in how he ran his business. He started prioritizing things like ethical sourcing, treating his employees fairly, and giving back to the community. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about using his business to do good.
That's really inspiring, but it also makes me wonder, was there any pushback? Like, did his colleagues or investors, people who are used to the old way of doing things, did they resist this change at all?
Oh, it definitely wasn't easy. The homily does mention that some people were skeptical. They thought his new approach was naive or even bad for business.
Yeah, that makes sense. Changing a whole system, especially when profit is involved, is really hard. How did he deal with those challenges?
He stuck with it. He stayed committed to his new vision, even when it got tough. He saw it as living out his faith, putting that divine love into action. And not just in his personal life, but in how he ran his business.
It's a powerful example of how this idea of love can be more than just like individual acts of kindness. It can influence systems and structures. Did the homily talk about the impact of these changes at all?
It did. It mentioned how his new business practices had this ripple effect. His employees were happier, they were more engaged, and his company started making a positive impact on the community, supporting local projects and helping people in need.
Wow, so we're seeing that this love It's not just this abstract idea. I can have real, tangible results. It makes me think about how we often separate our lives. There's our personal life where we try to be kind and compassionate. And then there's work where it's all about competition and profit. But this story shows that maybe those two worlds don't have to be separate.
I think you're right. The homily is definitely encouraging us to bring this radical love into all parts of our lives, including our work.
It makes me think about those zones the homily talked about. It seems like this businessman, when he changed everything, he was moving out of his comfort zone and into that growth zone, right? Was it all smooth sailing, or were there times when he dipped into the panic zone?
That's such a good point. The homily doesn't specifically talk about those moments of panic, but it's probably safe to say that they were there.
Yeah.
I mean, changing your whole mindset and overhauling your business, it couldn't have been easy. There must have been times when he felt doubt, fear, uncertainty.
I guess that's where that divine love comes in, right? Giving him the strength and the courage to keep going, even when things get tough. It's not about never feeling fear or doubt. It's about having something deeper driving you, pushing you through those hard times.
Exactly. It goes back to what we were talking about before, how this love is more than just human. It's a gift from God that helps us do things we couldn't do on our own.
So, if this businessman was able to make such a huge change in his life and his work, what does that mean for the rest of us? Does the homily give us any practical advice for moving from our comfort zones into that growth zone where this kind of love can grow?
It does. But before we get into those practical steps, I think it's worth taking a minute to think about something the homily mentions. It's about how this radical love changes how we think about success and happiness.
Yeah, you're right. That's a big part of it. We're so used to thinking about success in terms of money and what we achieve. But this homily seems to be offering a totally different definition.
It's such an interesting challenge, isn't it, to really reconsider what truly matters in life, what brings real, lasting fulfillment and joy. We see in the businessman's story that chasing after success, the way we usually think about it, didn't make him truly happy. It was only when he started living his life in line with this radical love that he found real meaning and purpose.
So the big question is, how do we apply that to our own lives? How do we start changing our perspective and our actions so that they line up with this kind of love, both in our personal lives and in the larger systems that we're a part of?
That's what we'll explore next.
So we've talked about how this homily is calling us to really change how we think about success and happiness. It's not about what we have, it's more about how we love and serve others. But to be honest, that can sound kind of overwhelming. Like, where do you even start with that?
You're right, it's not always easy to take these big ideas and figure out how to actually live them out. But the homily does give us some direction. It says we don't have to be perfect right away. It's more about just taking those small steps. Like, remember the businessman? He started making little changes in his company.
Okay, so like what kind of small steps? What are some things people listening could do, even today, to start putting this love into action?
Well, it could be really simple stuff, like truly listening to someone who needs it,
Mm-hmm.
or helping out a neighbor, or even just choosing to be more patient and understanding with people.
Those are great, yeah. But how do we go beyond that? How do we get from doing nice things for people to tackling the bigger problems, the things that seem too big to change, the systems and all that?
That's where it gets really tricky. And honestly, the homily doesn't give us all the answers,
Hmm.
but it does remind us of Christ's example. He didn't just do nice things for people. He challenged those in power. He spoke up for those who were marginalized. He called for justice.
So it's not enough to just be nice. We have to be willing to speak out against injustice, to work to make the world more fair and just.
Exactly. And that can mean having hard conversations, confronting our own biases, and even putting ourselves in situations that are uncomfortable.
It's like that growth zone again,
Yeah.
stepping outside what's comfortable, to fight for others, to stand up for what's right, even when it's risky. That's when this radical love really makes a difference.
Yes, exactly. And we can't forget that we're not alone in this. The homily really emphasizes that this love is a gift, something from God. It gives us the strength to do things we couldn't do on our own.
That's good to hear because sometimes it feels like the problems are just too big.
I know, it's easy to feel discouraged, especially with so much negativity around us. But the homily has a powerful message. Even small acts of love, if enough people do them, can change things.
That gives me hope. So as we finish up this deep dive, what's the one thing you really want people to take away from our conversation today?
I hope they'll be inspired to see this command to love one another as I have loved you as an invitation. It's not a burden, it's an invitation to live a life with more meaning, to connect with something bigger than ourselves and to make the world a better place.
I love that. And the businessman story shows us that it really is possible to live that out, even in ways we might not expect. So to everyone listening, wherever you are in your own journey, remember that you have the power to choose love, to step outside your comfort zone, and to be a part of something truly amazing. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving deep.